In the sultry haze of May 1928, a Los Angeles theater buzzed with anticipation. The crowd, a mix of wide-eyed kids and curious adults, settled into their seats, the scent of popcorn mingling with the faint hum of excitement. On the flickering screen, a plucky black and white mouse, named Mickey, piloted a rickety plane through a whirlwind of slapstick chaos in a film called Plane Crazy. The audience roared with laughter, unaware they were witnessing the birth of an iconic character dreamed up by two animation-obsessed pals who were about to change the world. But this story isn't about Mickey, it's about one of those pals. A man whose boundless imagination and relentless drive turned doodles into dreams and dreams into an empire. This is the tale of Walt Disney, a visionary who never had a proper childhood but gifted one to billions, a genius. As controversial as he was brilliant, his story feels like it was ripped from the pages of a fairy tale, yet is as raw and real as the Midwest plains he once called home. Picture a chilly December night in 1901, Chicago's winds howling through the cramped streets. Elias and Flora Disney welcomed their fourth child, Walter Elias Disney, into a modest home where money was tight and dreams were a luxury. Elias, a gruff carpenter with a temper as sharp as his tools, and Flora, a gentle schoolteacher with a knack for nurturing, were scraping by. Chicago in those days was a gritty, smoke-choked beast of a city, and the Disneys wanted out. By 1906, they packed up their lives and their four kids, Herbert, Raymond, Roy, and little Walt, and headed to Marceline, Missouri, a sleepy speck of a town nestled in the heart of America's breadbasket. For young Walt, Marceline was a wonderland. He roamed the family's small farms, sketching the ducks waddling by the pond, the horses grazing in the fields, and the rabbits darting through the grass. His pencil danced across scraps of paper, capturing the life around him with a flair that belied his age. But Elias saw no future in foolish scribbles. He was a hard man, quick with a belt and slow with praise, and he demanded Walt focus on chores, not art. Only Roy, Walt's older brother, saw the spark in those drawings, sneaking in paper and pencils to keep the flame alive. Life in Marceline was idyllic, but fleeting. By 1910, Elias fell ill, his body worn down by the harsh winters and endless labor. The farm was sold, and the Disneys moved to Kansas City, a bustling urban sprawl that felt like a betrayal to Walt. Gone were the open fields. In their place were crowded streets and towering buildings. Elias took a job delivering newspapers, and Walt, barely a teenager, was roped into the grind. Every morning at 3:30 a.m., he and Roy trudged through the pre-dawn chill, tossing papers onto porches. School became a blur of exhaustion, Walt's grades slipping, as he struggled to stay awake in class. Yet amid the drudgery, he found solace in art. At 14, he mustered the courage to ask Elias for drawing lessons. Surprisingly, his father agreed, perhaps sensing something in Walt's stubborn determination. Those lessons lit a fire in him, and by the time he was 16, Walt was churning out cartoons for his high school newspaper at McKinley High in Chicago, where the family had relocated again in 1917. But Walt's heart stayed in Kansas City. At 18, he broke free from Elias's iron grip and returned, landing a job at a local ad agency. It was there, in the cramped offices of the Kansas City Film Ad Service, that he met UBI Works, a quiet, bespectacled artist with a knack for bringing drawings to life. The two hit it off, united by a shared obsession with the fledgling art of animation. They spent late nights studying crude animated ads projected in local theaters, teaching themselves the craft through trial and error. In 1920, their hard work paid off with Newman Lafograms, a short film that poked fun at Kansas City's potholes and traffic jams. The local crowds loved it, and the ad agency clamored for more. Walt, barely 20, saw his chance. On May 23, 1922, he founded Lafogram Films, a scrappy startup with a dozen young artists working out of a dingy office. They poured their hearts into whimsical shorts, often laboring until midnight, fueled by coffee and camaraderie. The studio landed a big break, an $11,000 contract to produce a series blending live action and animation, featuring a girl named Alice in a cartoon world. Walt dubbed it Alice's Wonderland. He convinced UB to join the team, and they threw themselves into the project. But the dream soured fast. The distributor went bankrupt, paying only $100 of the promised sum. The Lafogram crew, underpaid and overworked, began to fray. One by one, they quit, even UB. By July 1923, Walt, just 21, was broke and alone, his studio crumbling. Heartbroken but unbowed, he turned to Roy, who urged him to declare bankruptcy and start fresh. With nothing left to lose, Walt made a bold choice. He'd chase his dreams in Hollywood. Arriving in Los Angeles with a suitcase and a half-finished reel of Alice's Wonderland, Walt crashed at his uncle's house, renting a room in a garage. He turned into a makeshift studio. He knocked on every studio door in town, pitching himself as a director, but his thin resume didn't impress. Roy, ever the loyal brother, stepped in with a small loan from his savings as a bank clerk. Together, on October 16, 1923, they founded the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio, Hollywood's first dedicated animation outfit. Walt's big break came when he pitched Alice's Wonderland to Margaret Winkler, a sharp New York distributor. She saw potential and ordered 6 episodes at $1,800 each, retaining the rights but offering the brothers a lifeline. Walt and Roy moved out of the garage into a proper office, hiring a small team, including UBI, who rejoined from Kansas City. Among the new hires was Lillian Bounds, a secretary whose quiet charm caught Walt's eye. By July 13, 1925, they were married, a love story born amid the clatter of animation desks. The Alice comedy series took off, but by 1926, trouble brewed. Margaret Winkler married Charles Mintz, who took over her business and pushed for a new series, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, to be distributed by Universal. Oswald, a cheeky bunny with a striking resemblance to a certain future mouse, was a hit. Walt hired more animators and stepped back from drawing to focus on directing, shaping stories with a conductor's precision. But Mintz was a shark. When Walt asked for a budget increase to match rising production costs, Mintz slashed their pay and reminded them he owned Oswald. Worse, he poached several of Walt's animators. Betrayed for the second time in 5 years, Walt was gutted. Yet with Roy, UB, and a few loyalists by his side, he vowed to fight back. No more rabbits. This time it'd be a mouse. In 1928, Walt and UB sketched a spunky rodent named Mortimer. Lillian, unimpressed, suggested Mickey. The name stuck. May 15, 1928, Plain Crazy debuted to a smattering of applause. Walt himself voiced Mickey's squeaky chirps, a role he'd keep until 1946. The film was a sensation, and Mickey became a cultural juggernaut, especially as the Great Depression gripped America in 1929, while the nation sank into despair. People flocked to theaters, and Mickey's antics offered a fleeting escape. Comics, toys, and merchandise flooded the market, raking in millions. Walt didn't stop there. In 1929, he launched Silly Symphonies, a series of musical shorts that pushed animation's boundaries. Flowers and Trees won an Oscar in 1932. By 1931, he was spiraling into a burnout so severe it bordered on depression. The birth of his daughter Diane in 1933, followed by the adoption of Sharon, pulled him back from the edge. In 1934, he gathered his animators after hours and, with theatrical flair, acted out a German fairy tale, tears streaming down his face as he recounted Snow White. He envisioned it as the first feature-length animated film. Hollywood scoffed, calling it Disney's folly. Walt pressed on, hiring hundreds and micromanaging every frame. On December 21, 1937, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered to a star-studded crowd. Walt gripped Lillian's hand, his nerves fraying. When the credits rolled, the audience erupted. The film grossed $8 million worldwide and earned Walt an honorary Oscar, one big statuette, and 7 small ones. The triumph was bittersweet. In 1938, Flora Disney died in a gas leak in a home Walt had bought her, leaving him racked with guilt. Some whispered this tragedy shaped the absent mothers in his films, though Walt brushed off such talk. He dove back into work, releasing Pinocchio in 1940, a $2.6 million masterpiece that won an Oscar for its song When You Wish Upon a Star. Now the studio's anthem? But Pinocchio and Fantasia, an ambitious blend of animation and classical music, flopped at the box office. Dumbo turned a modest profit, but the studio was in financial peril. He saw the strike as a personal betrayal, doubling down with a blacklist of agitators he suspected of communist ties. Egged on by a shady lawyer with fascist sympathies, The strike ended with concessions, but the studio's family vibe was shattered. World War II brought new challenges, with the US government requisitioning Disney's facilities for propaganda films, including one mocking a Nazi Donald Duck. Walt's stance during the war was murky rumors swirled of Nazi sympathies. Yet Disney's anti-Nazi shorts told a different story. Post-war Walt churned out hits like Cinderella, Peter Pan, and Lady and the Tramp. But his mind was elsewhere. Tired of seedy amusement parks, he dreamed of a magical alternative: Disneyland. Banks balked at the $17 million price tag, so Walt struck a deal with ABC, trading a weekly TV show for funding. On July 17, 1955, Disneyland opened in Anaheim, drawing 30,000 visitors on day one and $4 million in its first year. Walt's empire soared, with revenues jumping from $6 million in 1950 to $70 million by 1959. Walt wasn't done. In 1965, he began planning Disney World in Florida, a sprawling resort with hotels and parks. But time was running out. A lifelong smoker, Walt was diagnosed with lung cancer in 1966. On December 15th, at 64, he passed away. Leaving Roy to finish Disney World, the world mourned a giant whose 22 Oscars, 2 theme parks, and 157 films had redefined entertainment. Today, Disney's legacy, bolstered by acquisitions like Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm, spans 6 parks, 190,000 employees, and $80 billion in annual revenue. Walt's story is one of grit and genius, a man who built a kingdom from sketches, yet whose flaws, his temper, his controversies, made him as human as the characters he brought to life.